The views and opinions expressed on this podcast is solely of the creator and may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, or opinions of the listener. Listener discretion is advised. ChatGPT and AI technologies were not used or harmed in the creation of this podcast. It is 100% human-made by me, your host, Melanie. I am the creator of Under the Moon Paranormal. Check me out on YouTube for all kinds of paranormal adventures. And catch me here once a month underneath the full moon, telling you guys all about some spooky Ohio stuff. So, it is the Halloween Spooktacular episode. Excuse me. Already, geez, I just started. Okay, it's the Halloween Spooktacular episode. So I have an honorable mention that doesn't have enough information to be a full episode, but I still like to give it like some word of thought, I guess you could say. And then we're going to do the full moon report, of course, but I have quite a bit of listener submitted stories for you guys. If you see that green dot on my face, if you're watching on YouTube, I have a galaxy light on. It's just a little green star. But yeah, so let's go ahead and do our full moon update. All right, so everything you need to know about full moon in October for Aries. Let me get more situated here. I don't apologize. This is my show. I do it how I want to do it on Under the Moon Paranormal. Okay. A surge of motivation and the promise of new beginnings finds us all during the Aries full moon on October 17th. This lunation acts as a breath of fresh air, creating a sense that anything can happen when boldness and leadership are embraced. Keep your eyes peeled for opportunities and do not shy away from what the heart desires, which will become more apparent under the lunar glow. Trust me. You trust your instincts while pushing forward, and remember that it's okay to put your own interests first when pursuing happiness, success, and passions. Though you'll be highly focused on your own agenda, remember that these ambitions don't have to be a result of every person for themselves. With the sun shining in the harmonious and relationship-oriented Libra, you'll find such satisfactions and inspiring in others as you walk your own path. Rather than stirring competition with those around you, consider how mutual support can be beneficial for you and your peers. The more we strive to uplift one another, the better off we all are in the end. Remember that, people. Remember that. Settled alongside the full moon sits a supportive connection between Chiron and Jupiter, abundance and luck, and healing and happy byproducts of this cosmic climate. It'll be important that you lean into the power of positivity. You'll find your strength by dismissing negative thoughts, replacing them with more optimistic ideologies. Should you catch yourself immersed in eternal dialogue that doesn't boost your moral or confidence, seek to shift your disposition, even if your doing so feels forced at first. Rewiring your mind to cultivate a fierce belief in itself will be a huge for you in your path moving forward. The conversations you engage in will also have a significant impact on what comes next. So don't be afraid to talk yourself up and take credit for your own ideas. Venus and Pluto also chime in during this astrological event, opening the door to exciting new commitments or partnerships. Allow yourself to think in the long term, especially when it comes to business arrangements or matters of the heart. Find grace for yourself while navigating change, understanding that the path towards the personal evolutions is often peppered with messy moments. Lean into the destruction or chaos when it arises, if it serves your highest good. And remember that you can rely on yourself and the people you trust. When it comes to the matters of the heart, the energy suggests that it may be time to think about getting the next step with your beloved. Just make sure that you're partnered with someone who is supportive, who is honest, and nurturing before making any major life shifts. And always watch your emotions. They can get in the way, that's for sure. Okay, people. Just making sure. I'm trying to use Riverside to do the video part of podcasting because that's supposedly supposed to get you more views if you use Riverside. So we'll see how this goes. I don't like people looking at my ugly face, so if my accent hasn't offended you and my face does, I'm sorry. This is me. This is me in a nutshell. Hot Mess Express. Okay. So we're going to talk about deep in the woodland of Shawnee State Park. Okay, so Shawnee State Park is about 19 miles from Portsmouth and lies in an ancient valley with a mysterious little headstone there. Okay, so no one knows who this man is, but the legend says that he was found and buried in the 1700s, and who knows? Who knows? Well, here's the legend from what this little article I found in Haunted Ohio on Facebook says. In the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC, was a federal program offering jobs to young men to battle high unemployment during the Great Depression. The work in the parks and forest land and designed to open up these natural areas for public recreation. One site was set up at Shawnee State Forest. At the time, it was nearly inaccessible to the public. So the CCC's jobs were building bridges, trails, and roads. One day, while the men were looking, high memory usage detected. No shit. Still recording. We're going to keep going. Okay, so the CCC went to this site and set up at the Shawnee State Forest Park. At the time, there was nothing there but forest. One day, while the men were working on the forest roadway, they found the skeleton of a man, along with combs, implements, and tin plates. The types of things a peddler would sell. So they thought that he was like a traveling salesman, possibly. The bones were later moved and reburied adjacent to the little cleft in the rocks. A marker was set atop to commemorate the peddler. It read, H.T., August 13th, 1824. A.D. Dead M. Dead man, maybe? Old folks began to recall a peddler who in the 1820s routinely visited the rural towns nearby and who had a mysterious ceased calling on farms and on his usual route. So he was going from farm to farm in between these forests. Most believe the peddler was ambushed or murdered, possibly, but no one knows the truth. No one knows how he died, okay? Or at least they would not tell. For many years, locals avoided the area of the hollow after dark, reporting ghostly screams, whistles, and strange noises. And eventually they have named it Dead Man's Hollow. So there's a book about it, Haunted Hawking. It's a really great book. I suggest that you guys check that out. And there's a podcast on the lone grave at Dead Man's Hollow. It's got to be a short episode. Check them out. It's called Sometime Between Dusk and Dawn. And they have an episode about the lone grave at Dead Man's Hollow. So yeah, I didn't think there was enough to make a full episode out of that. But I wanted to mention it. You know, like he was a traveling salesman and something happened to him. Was it natural causes or was it not? We'll never know. But I will tell you what. Next summer, I plan on going to a bunch of different headstones in Ohio that I think could use a conversation with. So if you don't know what I do on YouTube, besides this podcast, I go to, we call them resting communities, but they're cemeteries and graveyards. And we just go there and talk to people that may not have been spoken to in a long time with our paranormal equipment. But we showcase the headstone and all that too. So this is Halloween, right? I love Halloween. It's my 20th wedding anniversary this year. And 23 years since I first met my best friend, my husband. So yeah, I love Halloween. How about you? Let me know in the comments. All right. So I have quite a few listener stories for you. So yeah, let's get into that because I'm really excited to share these stories with you. So the first one comes from Tammy in Ohio. She says, "Hey, I got a creepy for ya. I was heading home on State Route 41 around 3 a.m. one day. Foggy as all get out. All of a sudden, a bright ball of light just appears in the middle of the road. No other light sources around, by the way. I slammed on my brakes. Anyway, it stayed in the road, right in front of the van for about 15 seconds, and then just floated off into a field." Holy shit. That would scare me. Okay. This one I was tagged in on Facebook. So shout out to my cousin Josh, which while I'm recording this, it's his birthday. So happy birthday, cuz. Happy Creation Day. His friend had a paranormal experience that shook him to his core. This is a story from Seth in Ohio. "We don't believe in ghosts until we actually see one. 10 p.m. activity in my house tonight is at its all-time high. That shit just about gave me a heart attack. Never really seen a full-body apparition before. Got me shook up and still, while I'm typing this, cold chills and tears in my eyes. Seen and felt some shit in my time, but never any shit like that. I'm honestly scared to go to sleep. Gray, misty, full body. I caught it out of my peripheral and then looked right at it. It took off into my bathroom from my kitchen. I thought it was my friend, but I ran into the bedroom real fast. And she was in there. Not in the kitchen. Bro, I still get cold chills and tears in my eyes talking about it. First time in my life seeing some shit like that." That's quite a story there, Seth. Okay. This next one was from Ashley in Ohio. "Y'all, listen, I'm crying. So I was laying in bed last night and I kept seeing a face next to my phone in the dark. So I swiped my hand at it because, I'm not in the mood. I'm tired. I'm laying in bed, right? I think I hurt its feelings because after I swiped my hand at the face, I heard, 'That was so mean,' in a kind of whiny, girly voice, and I almost lost it. I did apologize because I didn't want her to grab my damn ankles in the middle of the night." You know, that's when the ghosts always bother me, is when I'm trying to sleep. No joke about that. Okay. This one's from Tommy Fireball in Ohio. "Me and my dad was driving down the road. I was driving, we passed a graveyard, and I saw a tall person in long black trench coat and black cowboy hat. I thought I did just see this, or was it just my imagination? I didn't say anything to Dad, but then he looked over at me and he said, 'You just seen that, didn't you?' All I said was yeah, because I wanted him to tell me what he saw, but he told me the exact same thing, a long, dark trench coat and cowboy hat. That was so freaky about this encounter that we drove right through the figure, an event that we both have never forgotten." Well, thank you, Tommy Fireball. I would freak out too if me and my dad drove through an apparition. But thank you for submitting your story. Okay, this next one gave me cold chills when I was reading it. Okay, my daughter and her family live a couple of blocks from my home. She had a neighbor with a meth addiction. The poor guy would walk around the neighborhood flailing at someone or something on his back that only he could see. I spoke with him in a quieter moment in his life, and he told me that he had inherited his house from his dad, and that his dad had died recently. He told that it was the worst thing to ever happen to him because it's heavily haunted. I never really talked to him after that, though. I regularly saw him walking the streets screaming in terror over his hallucinations. They were meth creations, or was it something else? So, one day this past summer, I stopped seeing him around. Never saw him for like 3 weeks. Then one day while leaving the house, he walked right in front of my vehicle at a stop sign. He was cleaned up and he looked sober and really healthy. I thought to myself that he probably went to rehab and straightened out, and good for him. I ran into my daughter the next day. She asked if I had heard about her neighbor, and I said that I had just seen him out just yesterday. She freaked out. Apparently, she too had seen him weeks after he had passed away, and she said the exact same thing that I thought, that he looked like he was getting better. Goosebumps. That story gives me goosebumps. For real. I think that was all of them. That's on my phone. I have some saved on my phone, then I have some saved on my email. That's on my browser. But yeah, I think that was, that's it on there. Okay, so I have a couple of more that were sent to the Gmail address. So if you want to submit your own story, please email me at underthemoonparapod@gmail.com, and I will read your story on the show. Okay, so this is from Lydia in Ohio. This event didn't happen to me, but to my late husband, back when he was 15 years old, and I have no reason to doubt the validity of this account. He and I have both had paranormal encounters throughout our lives. He was quite psychic himself, having gotten the ability from his mother's side of the family. Back in 1961, about several months after the Parma rail station closed permanently, he and his buddy Eddie decided to go exploring the abandoned 2-story building to see what they could find of interest. Back then it wasn't called urban exploration. It was called trespassing, plain and simple. They were old enough to know better, but too young to resist. I'm not being critical of them since I've trespassed once or twice in my youth myself. The last time I trespassed was with my cousins and sister in Pennsylvania. We were greeted by a farmer with a shotgun. Lesson learned. I no longer trespassed after that incident. First, some small background on the original railroad station. When it opened in 1909, it was part of the B&O Railroad. The site located in Parma, Ohio. It was a passenger train at first. In 1913, it was enlarged by adding a second story to the building. In 1926, it went from transporting passengers to hauling coal and freight. It operated in that capacity until it was completely shut down in 1961. The building was completely demolished in 1962, thus preventing curious teens and whoever to invade the premises just for a thrill, let alone possible injuries or fatalities since it was run down and not really safe to walk around in. Before that happened, John and his friend Eddie decided it would be neat to go explore the place to see what interesting treasures they could find. They waited for a weekend, and it was nearing nightfall. They mounted their bikes, since it wasn't too far to get to, and it took less than a half an hour to get there by bike. It was a bit darker when they arrived, but when they reached, they had the flashlights with them. They dropped their bikes near the perimeter and ventured on into the vacant building. The office door was locked, however. What appeared to be a large garage door was partially open for them to gain access. From there, they entered what looked like a warehouse that had 4 doors to the right of it. Those doors led to different office areas with a very long hallway in between them. They entered the main dispatch office. Inside it was very dark as there was a number of old metal desks lined up along the wall with all sorts of inadequate office machines sitting on them. They noticed a huge old map covering an area of wall on the far end of the room, and it smelled extremely musty and dirty, naturally. Because it was rather dark with no ambient street light, they moved cautiously through the building office, inspecting the desk and opening the drawers. Let me check and make sure this is still going. I mean, it says it's recording. Hello? This is why I hate doing it on Riverside, because it cuts in and out so easily. So I don't even know if we'd even got any of this story. Anyway, so there was old tattered files, folders that smelled moldy. They were rather engrossed in trying to see what they could possibly find that might be useful to take back home, when they both heard a steady click, 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 click noise fairly nearby. They were puzzled as to see the source of the noise, since they knew the building was empty. They began shining their lights around, trying to locate the source. Suddenly, Eddie nervously remarked to John that he found it and come to take a look at what he was seeing quickly. John hurried, left the area he was checking to join Eddie in front of the large desk located in the middle of the office. On the desk was a very old type of adding machine, the kind with a lot of keys and the arm on the side, and it had to be pulled down to advance to the next row. I think it was called a comptometer, but don't quote me on that. They stood in relative shock and amazement when they noticed that the keys on the device were being punched in, making the clicking noise by themselves with no human agent nearby to operate it. They snapped out of it rather abruptly when Eddie winced and told John that they should get the beep out of there. He began pushing John towards the entry door, and they came out to the side of the warehouse. And then they started running towards their bikes. John said he didn't know Eddie could run that fast, since they were somewhat of the fat side. Okay, this lady is very detailed about her story. Okay. Once they reached the bikes, they paused to catch their breath. Eddie was almost hyperventilating by that point, but was beginning to calm down enough to talk. John noticed how rattled and pale Eddie was and asked him what happened to alarm him like that. Eddie rather sheepishly told John that he heard a woman's stern voice close to his ear telling him to stop poking around and leave. John told him that he didn't see anybody there but the two of them. However, when they both glanced back at the building where the windows to the offices were located, they saw a face and partially silhouette of an older lady. She looked to be dressed like they did in the 1940s, with the gunmetal gray hair in a short, curled style in a clipboard clutched to her chest. It was the look on her face that sent chills down his spine. She did have a very stern demeanor in her facial expression. They didn't stick around to rationalize or discuss it. They just hopped on their bikes and pedaled like the wind back home. They had had enough adventure for one night. The next day, John went to Eddie's house, and his friend felt a bit more comfortable about talking about the previous night. Eddie told John that he used to be a skeptic in regards to things like ghosts, but he couldn't explain what he heard when they both observed the other night inside the building, as well as the strange woman standing at the window glaring out at them. John told him that the building was very old and he had seen a lot of use and activity in its day. He surmised that possibly the phantom woman was a former secretary that used to work there. It was quite possible that being a secretary was the most important thing to her after she passed, and she would come back to the place where she felt very useful and happy. I think we disturbed her space and she let us know about it, to the point of chasing us out. It made sense at that point. They kept the incident between themselves and never went back to that place. When it was demolished the following year, they both wondered if the lonely secretary finally moved on, no longer having her office desk to work at. And it was a little piece of Ohio rail history that they wanted to investigate, but didn't quite turn out to the way they wanted it to. John told me that he didn't go exploring old buildings after that. No more trespassing for him either. John and I were part of a population that had to learn the hard way. Hopefully these accounts serve to enlighten younger readers that you should be very careful what you decide to venture into. Well, thank you for submitting that beautifully written story. And I'm hoping the Spotify for podcasters picked the whole thing up. Yeah. So we have 2 more stories, and they're not as long. This one's called Fascinated and Shook. This is from Rebecca in Ohio. I just had to submit this as it just happened to me last week. I was driving to the credit union early in the morning. I had just gotten off work and wanted to take care of a bill and draw a little money out. The road I take is called Rocky River Drive, and it takes me through Brook Park Road, which is right in front of Cleveland Hopkins Airport. I mentioned the airport for a reason. I was going down the road when, of course, I hit a red light. I'm sitting there. I glance up to the sky. I do that frequently since I'm accustomed to aircrafts going overhead. And I saw a jet. Blue body with a red, blue, and yellow tail. However, it was completely motionless, just hanging there and not moving. Also, there was no noise. Now, usually jets make an unmistakable amount of noise, but this was absolutely silent. I did a double, then a triple take, and I could not believe that it wasn't moving at all. If I had been on the roof for one of those houses, I could have thrown a stone at it, because it was so close enough for me to observe it like this. Apparently, the other people around me noticed it too. The woman in the car next to me grabbed her smartphone and placed it on the dash to get a shot of it. And I saw the guy in the car behind me doing the same thing with his cell phone. Unfortunately, my crappy little track phone was zipped up in my purse, and I turned it off at that time. I had no time to retrieve it. On top of that, I was in traffic, and the light changed, and I had to proceed when the light turned green because I couldn't block the traffic. I went to the credit union slightly shook from what I had and others saw, but I had to calm down. It's not too good to drive in a shaken state, I assure you. On the way back, it was gone. I have seen things like this I saw on a show called Paranormal Caught on Camera on the Travel Channel. However, I viewed those videos with a certain amount of skepticism, and I thought it was all brilliant CGI. They now have my profound apologies. If I hadn't actually witnessed it along with the other drivers, I didn't notice any sidewalk traffic at the time, I wouldn't have believed it. I have tried to rationalize this away and cannot seem to come up with a scientific explanation for it. Sorry, folks. This has happened to anyone else. Please let me know about it. Please, please, please submit it to Haunted Ohio on Facebook. Okay. So she must have saw my post on Haunted Ohio. Thank you for submitting your story, Rebecca. Yeah, that's kind of weird. But I will say this. Sometimes planes look motionless, or water waves look motionless when we are moving too. But you said you was stopped at a traffic light and the other people around you stopped with you saw it too. So that makes me more apt to believe that you saw a glitch in the Matrix, possibly. That's interesting. Okay, this one's called Haunted Historic Mansion in Akron. How long is this one? It's not that long. Maybe we'll save this one for next time. Maybe we'll do an episode about this next time. Because, yeah, this one's, like, really long. And it's got a lot of history in it. So, yeah, we'll do this one. We'll save this one. So that's a to be continued. Holy shnikes. How far are we in? Yeah, we're in. Alright, so we are going to wrap this full moon Halloween extravaganza episode up. Holy cow. So yeah, follow me on YouTube. Check out my sister podcast, Explain Strange with Slap Recon. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook under Explain Strange Podcast. Yeah, check me out there. Email me, underthemoonparapod@gmail.com. Subscribe to my channel, where I post all things that are spooky. And a special shout out to my best friend, John. Here's to 23 more years, baby. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and stay spooky.